Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Executive Policy Committee meeting for Tuesday, April the 22nd, 2025. I'm joined today by council colleagues, Councillors Santos, Lukes, Duncan, Edie, Berwadi, and by our Interim Chief Administrative Officer, Mr. Sherwood Armbruster, members of our public service and our clerks, including Kate McMillan, who's having a birthday today. Happy birthday, Kate. So there we go. We are meeting on Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota peoples, the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 in Treaty 3 territory. And to begin with, we'll receive a motion, or get a motion, please, to receive the previous minutes. Thank you, Councillor Duncan. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Do we have any addendum reports today?
We do, yes. We have a number of addendum items, EPC items 16 and 17, and then the SPC on Public Works and Property and Development.
Councillor Berwadi, thank you. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Other than that, I think we can go into delegations.
Yes. Our first delegation is Councillor Gilroy, Daniel McIntyre ward, to be heard in support of increase of funds to the West End Biz for city graffiti removal, which is report number 7.
Good morning, Councillor.
Good morning. I just have a video to show you. So I think you're going to help me. I just need Travis. Let's talk about our community and the case I'm really trying to make for increased graffiti removal funding to restore our community pride. A visual demonstration from one back lane, one block, and the impacts. And all these photos are real photos I have taken from this one block. Now, why does this matter? Graffiti may seem small to some, but in our neighborhood it's really adding up fast. It really impacts how safe people are feeling, the feeling of community neglect, attracting people to our local businesses, property values in the community, and of course our own community pride. Now, where we live, this is the reality, and it's not fair for those that are living around it. Now let's walk through just one back lane in our ward. This is the impact from just a single stretch from Sargent to Ellis. Now imagine this block after block. The pattern is not isolated incidents. This pattern spreads when not addressed quickly. Studies show that graffiti can lead to higher rates in crime. One back lane. This is one back lane. Graffiti makes a community feel neglected. Graffiti lowers our property values. Graffiti leads to customer avoidance in our local businesses. With limited resources and delayed response, our city graffiti removal crews and the West End Biz are doing their best, but they're overwhelmed. We need more crews and a faster response. What is the community saying? It makes them feel unsafe. We are trying to keep our yards clean, but it keeps getting tagged. Why even paint my garage anymore? Does the city not care about our community? Why bother reporting? Nothing gets done anyways. What more funding can do? It can allow for faster removal, adds an element of safety. It restores our pride in our community. It improves perception of our community. It better supports the residents that are living there and the businesses around the community. It helps with crime prevention, and it shows that a city cares. A cleaner future starts now. This back lane is just one example. Let's give our communities the tools to fight back against vandalism. Support increased funding for graffiti removal. Let's keep our community and neighborhoods safe, clean, and welcoming. What if this was your community?
So this was really the effects that we have in our community, and I see it becoming more and more. Graffiti is really impacting our neighborhoods, and it's growing. And the studies really link graffiti to crime, and especially youth crime and the progression of crime. It starts with tagging, and then it escalates from there. So it's really vital that we remove the graffiti as fast as we can, and it really will help with the negative impacts that we're having within inner city wards. I think Councillor Eadie and Councillor Santos knows this all too well. It really does impact the neighboring community, and so we don't spend a lot on graffiti removal, and the West End Biz is one of the partners in graffiti removal. I think they'll be here to speak to it as well today. They would like to see an increase in funding. They're getting much more demands. They do graffiti removal in other biz zones as well, and they've had to increase their rates for other biz zones, but some of those biz zones can't really afford it, like in Councillor Eadie's ward. You know, that impacts what they can do in Councillor Eadie ward, where, you know, they really probably couldn't afford to pay for graffiti removal, but that's where we're at. They're looking for other ways to generate revenue. I think this is something that the city could be contributing, and I think it could have a very positive impact on the community. We're already dealing with a lot of issues around garbage, so the community really does feel very neglected. So I guess I'm asking you to really ask the budget working group. I don't know if there's funds this year for us to look at even providing some funds this summer to help do some work. I know there's an arts crew there. Wouldn't it be nice to have every one of those garages I showed you? And that wasn't even all of them. And I just want to repeat, that was one back lane from Sargent to Ellis. I didn't even highlight all of them, so that's how bad it was. Wouldn't it be nice to have murals on all those garages? So there are things that we can be doing, but the first step is really getting extra money for graffiti removal so we can deal with the impact that we're seeing and try to eliminate some of the crime that we're having as well. So I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Eadie?
Thanks for your presentation, Councillor Gilroy, and you bring up a good point. I don't think it's much different in terms of graffiti, my ward, your ward, or Councillor Santos's ward. But there is a graffiti problem that goes beyond the inner city all the time. And one of the aspects, I don't know, have you heard, I'm not sure who the inspector is for your area, but you know, we've heard that there's what the police think is a gang war, street gang war of sorts, which means they're out there marking territory, right? That's what the people are afraid of, those tags that are indicating that they're, you know, gang, this is my territory. Is that happening in your ward?
Yeah, I would say it's some of it clearly was gang tagging, but other is probably, you know, kids that are also tagging. So just knowing that our youth crime has really increased and knowing that we really need to focus on that. A piece of this is dealing with the impacts of where people live. When you don't have pride in your community, it makes a huge difference on the social and economic outcomes of these communities, right? So if we actually kind of put pride back into those communities by things that I think we can actually do quite affordably, graffiti removal isn't really that expensive in the long term, and neither is garbage removal. If we could be providing community pride back, we could be potentially having better economic outcomes, higher tax bases, because the property values would go up and we would have an increase in taxes. So there are some benefits to us doing these improvements as well.
Yeah, just in terms of dollars, I'll give you an example in my ward. I mean, I appreciate the work that the West End Biz does. They have partnered and do partner, I believe, with business improvement zones, but what had happened was the question was asked from the Selkirk Avenue Biz Board members. We were submitted a bill that was like 400% higher or more. It was equivalent to about 11% of the revenues that the business pay and levy, up over from about somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000 to over $5,000. Now, my real question is, you know, I've seen over the years this rising, but why aren't we promoting a bigger investment in the graffiti removal that the city does rather than, you know, downloading it? And because the business members are saying, well, we're paying property taxes. Why do, and they ask me, well, why do we need to contract with the West End Biz when you know, the city supposedly is providing that service?
Well, the city actually contracts out to the West End Biz, so I don't know your experience, but my experience is the West End Biz gets the work done faster, more efficient. They also have like high-tech equipment that can be done in the winter as well. So they've really kind of have become a place to go for intense graffiti removal. And so their expertise is far by none, and it's quite frankly who I go to first when I do have issues. So they do a really good job. They do it also on behalf of the city. So I guess that, you know, they're coming to me asking me for more money. It makes sense. I have a drowning community in graffiti, and that's why I'm here today.
Thank you. Councillor Brady, then Councillor Lukes.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gilroy. I appreciate your attention to this matter. I mean, having a safe community, it feels safer when things like graffiti aren't prevalent. Are you aware that the City of Winnipeg Police website has, under the category damage/mischief to property not from a collision, if you were a victim of graffiti vandalism, paint vouchers and graffiti wipes are available for pickup at police headquarters. Were you aware that that's a service that's available?
Yeah, a lot of this.
Why can't residents just fix it themselves?
You know what, a lot of this stuff is, it's intense to get off. It's not easy fixes. I've seen it done. It's not the wipes. That's for really small things. This, you saw some of the pictures. These are whole garages. These are multicolored. So it really needs intense cleaning, and their process is quite intense.
It mentions paint vouchers as well.
Pardon me?
It mentions paint vouchers as well on the...
Yeah, they match the paint, and then they have specialized stuff that they use on it. Those are best for Joe to answer, because I'm not into that. But
No, but I'm saying the police, according to the police website, paint vouchers are available at police HQ.
yeah, but we're overwhelmed, and it happens like all the time, Councillor Barati. Like, so that's why if we have a
But
project.
why can't residents just do it themselves? Like, why are we trying to have
Because
a business?
they're tagged ongoing all the time, and the amount of tagging that is needed needs a full coverage. It's not what they can keep up with.
I agree with you, but why not let residents do it?
Because they can't keep up with it. That's fine in your community where the tagging might be a once in a while thing, but in our community, it's daily, and that's because we're allowing it to grow, right? My residents have done a pretty good job getting it cleaned up that actually own their homes. We struggle with some of the rental properties, and so I think that those are kind of something that we can contribute in helping to support.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Lukes.
Yeah, in the South End, we've had a lot of graffiti too, not to the degree of yours, but a lot of graffiti. So I know that Take Pride Winnipeg does graffiti removal, and the Boys and Girls Club does graffiti removal also. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think what I'm hearing is that the West End maybe does it in a more timely manner than calling out the city, the Boys and Girls Club, or Take Pride Winnipeg.
Okay, so Take Pride Winnipeg doesn't, I've never I don't really experience much with Take Pride, I'm going to be honest with you. We give them very little money, so they don't really have the opportunity. They're volunteer-based. They cannot keep up. And neither does the Boys and Girls Club. Like, you need to have an organization doing this work. It's kind of like managing things with their downtown. There's Downtown Safety Partnership. This is clearly not isolated to my community, because you all are feeling it too. So we need to manage it. So we got a community organization doing it. We also have the city doing it, and those are the people that should be responsible right now. I don't want it left up to a volunteer. We can't even get the capacity of people to come down and clean the inner city. That really needs a lot of extra supports in terms of garbage pickup, and we can't even, like, Take Pride can't even keep up with that. They just don't have the volunteer base.
So if the residents can't keep up with it, how does the city keep up with it? Like, I think it's a bigger problem, right? Like, if the residents themselves, you know, if they had the paint and they did it, and they can't keep up with it, how would the city keep up with it? Or the biz zone keep up with it if it's happening so regularly? It sounds like it's a much bigger problem, like.
Well, you know what, when we were doing this in the 90s, we did keep up with it. It's just a willingness to put the money and the resources into it. That's why a few months back, Councillor Edie and I put forward a motion for us to take a look at inner city areas, in particular where we are struggling around graffiti, garbage, and social economic issues. And we did see a really increase in improving those areas. And now we're seeing the aftermath of that funding leaving. Right? So right now, what we need to do is inject more funding. We need to help support the communities that don't have necessarily the people out there that are cleaning their own yards. That is the case in some of my wards. Some of the wards are pristine, right? In cases, we're talking about cases in the heavier part of the downtown that just really requires more people helping out, because there's not the capacity within the community to do the work, right? So even if you want to take that and put it towards the areas funding, you can put the increase to funding just in the areas where we have residential organizations like Spence, I forget what they're called, housing improvement zones. In our housing improvement zones, even if you want to just direct the money into those areas, then we can make sure that we're doing the work we're needed, the deep dive to clean those up.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Councillor. Just one question. On your motion, that the city provide an increase in grant funding to the West End Biz in the amount of $55,000 per year, per annum. Is that an additional $55,000 or up to? I can't remember what the amount that the West End Biz gets now. Maybe Mr. Cornelison can give us clarity when he presents.
Yeah.
But are you just saying if their amount is below $55,000, move it up to $55,000? Or
Yeah.
is this if $55,000 more over and above?
I'm going to say move it up, because I'm going to have a hard sell getting you, I think, any of you to want to put money into this anyways. So I think they get around 35 right now. So if we increase it to 55, that would give a good bump.
Appreciate that. Yeah, the motion, the way I was trying to.
Yeah, it's
I think
confusing.
I think it's
fair
worded.
enough.
Okay, we'll get clarity maybe from Mr. Cornelison.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Oh, Councillor Duncan, and then we'll let you go.
My apologies. Thanks for presenting here today. I hear what you're saying. Obviously, we all have our own unique struggles in each community. I don't envy the situation that your residents are in, and I understand. Councillor Edie makes some valid points around, unfortunately, the gang territory marking out there. I don't think that's going away anywhere until we have some serious addressing of our criminal code, especially when it comes to Youth Criminal Justice Act. But that's for another day. Just a quick question around funding. How much funds have you put towards specifically graffiti from your communities fund or any other funding source that you have as city councillor?
Oh, I would have to look into, I do a lot of murals to help kind of stop the tagging on bigger ones. So Joe might even be able to answer that for you, because I forget how many murals I've done over the years. But this year, I just don't have money in my communities funds because I'm actually doing major park improvements. And because we don't have enough funding for a lot of our parks, I'm having to use the community fund to offset some of those costs, which I think are added value to the communities, including some of the neighborhood adjacent to where the graffiti is. So I'm doing the best of what I got. My money's going to really good causes, and I do what I can with the money I got.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Appreciate that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Here.
Okay, our next delegation today is Dominic Lloyd with Andrew McLaren and Tamara Ray Beebridge from the Winnipeg Arts Council to be heard in support of report number 1.
Good morning, all.
Morning, Your Worship. Good morning, councillors. Thank you for hearing us today. My name is Andrew McLaren. I'm the volunteer board chair of the Winnipeg Arts Council, and I have Dominic Lloyd and Tamara Ray Beebrick staff with me here today, who will back me up and answer any questions that you stump me with. I'm here today to speak in support of the Percent for Art program, but also suggest some improvements that you might want to consider to enhance its impact. To start with, why do we need a Percent for Art program? The Winnipeg Arts Council manages the city's public art program, and the city's public art policy calls for a well-funded, well-administered program and commits to a dedicated funding mechanism. Historically, the public art program was funded separately from WAC's operating grant, which supports our granting programs and other initiatives like the Poet Laureate. Our agreement with the city says the operating grant cannot be used to fund public art, so an alternative funding model is necessary. Prior to 2019, WAC received $500,000 annually for the public art program through the city's capital budget. That amount was reduced over time and has now been eliminated entirely. While some capital projects like the St. Vital Bridge have started to include public art projects, this ad hoc approach doesn't provide the stable, sustainable funding we need to retain staff, plan effectively, and build a cohesive program that aligns with city priorities. It can take months or years of planning to get a public art project built. Last year at budget time, City Council asked the administration to work with the Winnipeg Arts Council to develop a program that would include public art in major capital projects. The proposed Percent for Art program that's before you today can address the gaps we've talked about and is modeled on how other municipalities in Canada fund public art. So what has the public art program funded in the past? Well, all kinds of things. Major sculptural works like Empty Full at the Millennium Library Park and Bouquet in Kildonan Park. It's funded community scale projects like the Chinatown and Central Park banners. It's funded transit integrated works like the Roostertown Kettle and Métis land use. It's resulted in permanent and temporary installations in libraries like the Four Flowers at Cornish Library and poetry installations at libraries including the Charleswood Library. It's funded temporary works to activate public spaces like those presented in Old Market Square during Nuit Blanche, including Impulse and Fire Cycle. It's also funded with art projects, which are collaborations between community groups and professional artists like Along the Creek and Bunns Creek Park. So how does the Winnipeg Arts Council feel about this program that's before you today? We were very pleased to work closely with City Council and the administration to rethink how public art can be funded sustainably in Winnipeg. We think the basic model outlined in the administrative report is very positive. The multi-year pooled approach provides much needed flexibility so we can plan effectively and be strategic about how and where to develop new works. We're excited to see this framework come before the city, and we think it should be approved. With that said, we do see some key opportunities to strengthen the recommendations. We would love to see an increase in the allocation from 0.25%, or about $200,000 per year, to at least 0.5%, which would be about $350,000 a year, or ideally 1%, which would be about $500,000 to $600,000 per year. We'd like to see separate funding for the public art manager position. This role is critical to the program planning and delivery and was previously funded from within the public art program allocation. And we'd love to start to implement the program in 2026, perhaps with a phase into the full program budget by 2028. So in closing, I just wanted to reiterate why public art is important. Public art tells our stories. It reflects who we are, where we've come from, and where we're going. It helps shape the landscape, brings beauty, identity, and meaning to our public spaces. It invites conversation. The Roostertown Kettle, the streetcar across the street, they tell you, they invite you to ask the question, why is this thing here, and investigate the reason why those things are where they are. We also know from our own market research that 90% of Winnipeggers say public art gives the city more character, and 77% say Winnipeg needs more public art. We also know that Destination Winnipeg markets Winnipeg's quality of life advantages, highlighting its dynamic art scene and the rich tradition of its multicultural festivals. So with that, I thank you for your time today, and I'm open to taking any questions.
Thank you very much. Appreciate, I guess it's a comment more than the question. You acknowledged it right off the top, Andrew, the work that you and your team did with our staff as well. And I think our staff put a lot of time and energy into it, likewise with yourself and others. And so I'm glad to see that that dialogue and working relationship happened. So thank you. Any questions at all? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next delegation is Lanny McInnes to be heard with respect to item 4 of the Standing Policy Committee on Water and Waste and Environment, and Lanny is joining us via Zoom.
Good morning. Oh,
I'm present.
we can't. Start again, Lanny, please.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Now we can. Yeah.
Okay. Apologize for that. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lanny McInnes. I'm President and CEO of the Manitoba Home Builders Association and the Executive Director of the Urban Development Institute of Manitoba. My apologies for not being able to join you in person this morning, but I do appreciate the opportunity to speak to you on behalf of our collective members in full support of the rapid response process for water and wastewater servicing capacity inquiries. As we remember, in February 2024, Mayor Gillingham challenged all city departments to be housing departments in his annual State of the City address. The report before you today is a real demonstration that this challenge has been accepted by the city's administration and is being put into action. We support the recommendations contained in this report, and we encourage EPC and all of council to adopt them. This report recommends tools and resources needed to enable and implement the city's direction to add density where it's wanted. And we have discussed with many of you the need to dedicate human resources across departments in a strategic way that will help speed up new housing, especially infill and multifamily housing. And again, this report recommends steps that do exactly that. These are important investments that, from our perspective, fully align with the mayor and council's direction. I'd like to thank the administration for the great work that they've done on this front and for the ongoing dialogue that they have with our industry and our membership. We've got a fantastic relationship with the team at Water and Waste, and this report is fully supported by our membership. And thank you very much for the time and the opportunity to speak to this item this morning with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McInnes. Any questions at all? I guess I would have just one. You may not be able to answer this, but just from what you're hearing from your members, do you have a sense of, how many projects are kind of maybe sitting dormant because they lack, or potential projects because they just lack the knowledge of whether or not there's wastewater and water capacity?
Probably not a number, but I'll give you a specific example of what the recommendations in this report will help address. And we've been experiencing, and it's been raised a number of times by our members, some areas where projects that are going through the process do get bogged down and delayed. And one of those is the drawing review time that developers experience. And the department has done a great job in identifying through the number of units within water and waste, the touch points where individuals do those reviews. And so it's multiple working units, but it's usually one individual within each of those units that does that task. And should they be sick or on a temporary leave or take some vacation time, that work stops until they get back and review it. And what this report will help do is provide the resources to address that and to eliminate those types of delays through the process. And so that helps every single application that goes through, not just a few that are waiting on engineering reports in terms of water and wastewater capacity on a specific site.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, I certainly appreciate from our staff the rapid response process. I mean, that's the key, right? Yes first culture, that's what we want around here, a yes first culture, where we just can receive the inquiries of those that want to build, develop, grow the city, and be able to help them in a rapid fashion to make it through the city's processes without cutting corners, but make sure that we get good customer service. So appreciate this report coming forward, and thank you for your support. Any other questions at all? Okay, thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Next up is Brian Pincott to be heard in support of report number 1. And Brian is joining us in person.
Mr. Pincott, welcome. Good morning.
Good morning, Your Worship, members of the committee. Pleasure to be here. As most of you probably know, I was a city councillor for 10 years in Calgary before moving to this glorious city. What most of you probably don't know is that prior to my being on city council, I worked in theater for 20 years. So I called myself an artist. I was primarily a lighting designer in theater. I actually did shows with MTYP and PTE before, many decades ago.
Some would say council is a form of theater, but I digress. Carry on. So
I would hate to tell you the number of similarities between council and a dysfunctional rehearsal hall. And as the mayor at the time, Mayor Broncani, used to say, only somebody from the arts would consider politics to be a stable career choice. So I came to council with an arts background, and I ended up being the council representative on the Calgary Arts Development Board, which is the mirror for Winnipeg Arts Council, and I am now very proudly a member of the Winnipeg Arts Council Board. And in my time on city council, we talked a lot about public art. We talked a lot about arts funding, and I am a very strong proponent for public art. And when I look at the policy that we have before us, the percentage for public art, I look and I see that the work of Winnipeg Arts Council and administration has bypassed a lot of the problems that we actually had in Calgary, which was that it was tied to project. It was fully administered within administration, which ended up being a bit of a problem, and it devolved out to Calgary Arts Development to operate, and they adopted a percentage for public art. Now, Calgary, just like pretty much every other city that has this type of funding program, which I believe is very successful, it is not called a percentage for public art, it's called a 1% for public art. If you look at the comparison to other municipalities, you'll see that pretty much every one of them is 1% or more that they allocate out of capital projects for public art. I think this gives something meaningful to work with. Now, what does that mean? And so I guess while I support the report, and I'm here in supporting it, I would encourage you to make a few adjustments to the report. One is to change it from a percentage to 1% for public art. The second would be to remove, in the report, there's a recommendation for a cap of a maximum of $250,000 per project. I'd remove that cap. The benefit of not having a cap is that when it isn't pooled, when you have a large project in one area, that means that one very large project, say a $500 million project or a $300 million project, will then provide and fund public art right across the city, all of your wards. So having a cap means that you actually don't benefit from the large projects. So I'd remove the cap. Also, as you heard from Winnipeg Arts Council, I would start it next year. I would ideally start it with the next project that goes to tender. That's where I would start it. But let's start it next year. If you wait to the next 4-year budget cycle to begin this program, the public art program will have gone 4 years without any funding. 4 years without any funding. in something that is vitally important for our city. So that is, those are key things that I would recommend that you look at. Now, why change it to 1% as opposed to 0.25%? The administration report estimates it'll be just over $200,000 a year that the 0.25% will generate, of which you pull out the maintenance and oversight, which means that you end up with $180,000 left for public art. To put that in context, with a couple of projects, installations that we all know, across the street. I'm very directionally challenged in Winnipeg. I think it's the rivers that throw me off. I lived in a north, south, east, west grid city for far too long. Over there, if you look at the streetcar over there, with the proposed 0.25% for public art, you would have to pool your money, your funding, for 2 years to be able to build that. That means no public art for 2 years to be able to get that. Another really great series of installations, which is along the Blue Line, where we have public art at all of the stops. Under this policy of 0.25%, to be able to get what we have on the Blue Line, you would have to pool 10 years. 10 years of the public art, of 0.25% for public art, to be able to to do the installations that are on the Blue Line. Really great projects. Really great art installation along that line. So 0.25% doesn't actually get you to have the art, the public art installations that we know and all connect with across the city. And that's really, really important. Public art is a way for people to share their stories. It's a way for people to connect with their city, with their community, with their environment. It's a way to surprise people. It's a way to force a newcomer to the city to actually learn about where they are. When I moved here, I learned about Winnipeg's history by visiting public art, trying to understand why that's there. What's the story this piece is telling me? It adds value. It adds value to the things that we do. There was a great public art piece in Calgary that we did where they embedded a poet with a sewage renovation project, so sewer lines. So the water department was going in and ripping up sewer lines and putting in new sewer lines. Seriously, unglamorous, unsexy work. And as part of public art, they embedded a poet in that project. And the poet wrote poetry, obviously, and told stories about it and was able to get people to understand stuff about their city that they had no idea about. Stuff that you guys all know. You know how it all works and how vitally important it is. But those of us who live in our homes and flush our toilet, it's out of sight, out of mind. We don't think about it. We just think, oh, it's just this other thing that we do. Public art allows us to connect with community in surprising and wonderful ways. I was in Melbourne recently, and I came across this public art installation, which was a series of pipes, and on top of each pipe was a bell. And there was an app that went with it, and you could load a song into your phone and send it to the bells, and the bells would play the music. And I was there when somebody had sent a piece of music that they had composed themselves, and it just played on the bells. That is public art. It allows people to connect with their community. The nice thing about 1% for public art in capital projects is that it's part of a capital project. It isn't something that council has to say in a budget every year, oh, we're going to allocate X amount of money to public art. It is embedded within a project. And it doesn't mean that if you have a $10 million project with that 1% for public art, it doesn't mean that suddenly the budget for the project becomes $10,100,000. The project is still $10 million. The project is still exactly what you allocated for. It means that that $100,000 for public art is embedded within the costing of that project. And when you send a project to tender, when you approve it, when it's at the classification for approval, there's a 10% contingency in that. So you are sending projects out to tender where you are anticipating a 10% contingency. The public art, 1% for public art would be in that 10% contingency. So I would recommend you look at that. I would recommend as one last thing, and the report highlights one downfall to this approach, and that is the uncertainty.
Okay, each 1 minute to finish. Councilor Santos,
15 seconds.
15 seconds. Extend your time, 15 seconds.
The report highlights the uncertainty. I would recommend that you backstop it. I would say do 1% for public art, which the report anticipates will generate $500,000 a year minimum. And I would make a commitment to backstop that so that Winnipeg Arts Council and Winnipeg artists have that certainty that they can plan, so that if it does only generate $400,000 in any given year, council tops it up to the $500,000. So backstopping it gets around the uncertainty factor and the downfall of that program.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Pincock. Appreciate that. Any questions at all? Never thought of wastewater treatment as poetry, but nonetheless, some kind of something
There was
to
a
do. So.
great photography of it as well. Just lovely.
Great. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate that.
Have a wonderful day.
Okay, our next delegation is Bill Jost from General Council of Winnipeg Community Centers to be heard in support of report number 5.
I see Laura's coming too. Are they coming together? Or something?
Bill, I just want to confirm, are you and Laura presenting separately? Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Good morning. Good to see you. Welcome.
Good morning, Mayor Gillingham and councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on the report for the process improvements for community center renovation grant. I've been a volunteer in the community center system for over 25 years. I'm speaking to you in my capacity as the first vice president of GCWCC. But I'm also a volunteer at Wildwood Community Center as past president, and I've experienced firsthand the process to apply for the renovation grant. And for a number of years, I've been president of District 1, the City Center Community Center Board, and have sat at the table with many other community center volunteers discussing challenges on a regular basis. Community centers, as you know, are governed by a board of volunteers. They are committed to the success of their community and want to ensure that their centers are safe and accessible for residents to participate in recreation and leisure. The boards consist of smart and hardworking individuals with various skill sets, but they require timely and important feedback when it comes to maintaining and renovating the city-owned community center buildings and grounds. Many of the community centers were built in the 60s and 70s, and due to age require more and more maintenance to keep them safe and functioning. This is why Community Center Renovation Grant is so critical to the centers. But volunteers are frustrated with the red tape, delays in funding, cost increases due to slow response times, and hoops they need to go through to get the project off the ground. These exact frustrations are what brought a number of community centers in District 1 to meet in the spring of 2023. At that time, we met with councillors from our areas where we provided feedback and were cautiously optimistic that change would happen. But here we are, 2 years later, and by the report, it looks like we will be at least another year before any additional support. The area of most concern from centers was the slow response time and support from municipal accommodations. Community centers agree it's impossible for one employee to oversee 63 community centers consisting of 215 individual buildings located at 80 separate sites. And that's just the tip of the responsibilities. On top of that, there's the responsibility to respond to multiple community center volunteers and their staff on a day-to-day maintenance and multiple maintenance projects. In March 2024, we heard that 2 FTEs were approved in the budget. We understood that at least one more employee would be there to support these renovation projects. However, the board of directors at GCWCC learned with the release of this report before you that there is no additional staff assigned to assist a coordinator of MA. This is a major concern for center staff and volunteers who we have spoken to, and we hope there is a decision made to add an FTE to support the coordinator for community centers. All that being said, I do want to acknowledge community centers provide their feedback to General Council of Winnipeg Community Centers, and in June 2024, the Board of Directors agreed to a number of recommendations that were sent to Community Services Department. I'm pleased to see that a number of the recommendations in the report have been designed to streamline the process for applying for the funding. The concept of having a single yearly intake for the program is beneficial and will allow community centers and municipal accommodations team to review the requests once a year, allowing time to focus on project reviews, project sign-offs, and other important inspections. By moving the grant intake earlier in the year, it will allow centers to use existing quotes and documentation for multiple grants, like provincial grants, if they are working towards a project that exceeds $100,000. Introducing the submission of a project expression of interest phase, whereby the community centers would submit their project requests in a simplified form before requesting quotes, would save volunteers a significant amount of time and effort. They would know if their project is conceptually approved before having to gather quotes and complete all the necessary paperwork. Overall, the GCWCC board and volunteers I've spoken to are in support of the recommendations in this report. And I want to thank Community Services team that put the report together. I also want to thank the CCRGP Grant Review Committee for their continued support and for their behind-the-scenes effort to push through grant requests. I know the responsibility doesn't lie with just one person. It takes a team to support community centers. In effect, we're supporting community residents in their efforts to provide meaningful recreation and leisure opportunities. Each of the volunteers and staff want to continue to see a strong future for the City of Winnipeg. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jost. Are the questions now, or do we go to the next delegate first? Madam Clerk?
They're not. They're separate,
Separate.
yes.
Any questions about Councilor Lukes?
I want to thank you very much for your volunteer effort and your commitment for as many years as you have. Community centers, as you know, are just critical to the health and well-being of our city. So I guess the question I have for you is, we have 60, 61, I'm not sure on the last count of community centers. We've just gone through a review. We know that a lot of them are from the 60s and require a lot of repair. I don't envision being able to ever afford repairing all of them. What are your thoughts on closing some of them and allowing funding, more funding to go, because there's a limited amount of funding, right?
Yep.
So we can dissipate it across 60 centers, or we can dissipate it across 50. What are your thoughts on that? You've been around for a while on this topic.
Well, my thoughts are, a lot of the community centers are within walking distance of people's homes. If you start putting the money into the bigger like recreation places and everything else, there's people out there that don't have cars. They can't get to, places unless they walk or take a bus or whatever. Right now, it's the community centers, and when they originally came into play, were so that every area had somewhere that people could walk to, people could get to. The kids could just go on their own to get there. I think if you start closing community centers, you're just sort of pushing people away from the community centers, because people aren't going to go there.
And now this only came to light to me in the last, I guess it was 3 years, maybe it's 4 now. You'll recall that $8 million was to initially go towards facility. It was divided up to go and support multiple community centers, city-owned community facilities. In that process, I learned that we don't have an exact estimate of the costs of what really is required to be done for these 60 community centers. What I learned was the volunteer-run community centers, they would make applications for whatever they felt their major projects were to the renovation grant. Whether it was, there was no real guidance on what the actual building structure needed to be done, because there was never really a thorough assessment done. So one particular community center I worked with, well, actually 2 that I worked with, was raising hundreds of thousands of dollars because they wanted to redo the kitchen, they wanted to redo the floor, the bathroom, whatever. But yet there was no real formal report from the city on the city infrastructure of what, you got a hole in the roof, you have these other issues that should be done. Are you aware of that, or?
Yeah, that's why we're asking for another person for municipal accommodations to help out. I mean, there's just too much there for one person to do, because reports are not being done, the inspections are being done, but the community centers aren't seeing what's in the reports, because the reports aren't being sent out. If the reports are being sent out, then we know where our deficiencies are. If we know where our deficiencies are, then those are the projects that we're going to go to. And then it won't be like, with the deficiency report, at least we'll know what really needs to be done on the building in a timely manner. There's some things that the city, that with the UFF, the city takes care of, and there's some things that the community centers are responsible for. But sometimes things just don't work out.
Yeah.
We just did a renovation on our community center, and we did the outside envelope. Well, when the guys were doing the outside envelope, they happened to get onto the roof or whatever, and a guy fell through the roof because it was completely rotten and needed to be done. The city had no money, municipal accommodations had no money to fix our roof. So we just fixed it ourselves through donations and other monies that we got.
So, I mean, I'll ask this to the public service, and I'm assuming the answer will be, well, Councillor, we don't have the staff to do these assessments, but for like many, many, many years, we've been doling out these renovation grants. It just seems, I just found it astounding that we'd never done an assessment of these buildings, yet year after year after year, we're doling out $100,000 or whatever in these renovation grants to community centers that just choose to do whatever they want, which
Well,
is
it's
a lot
not,
of work that needs to be
don't
done.
forget, when you put in your grant, it goes to a committee,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
The committee's got city people on it, municipal accommodations, GCWCC, and they look over all the grants, because there's only so much money in the pot each year.
Yeah.
So they look over the grants and see which are good or which ones need to be done, and which ones don't. And
Or other questions at all? Councillor Duncan, and then we'll move on to Ms. Messman. Go ahead.
Thanks. Nice to see you here. I appreciate your presentation today. So just clarify for us here around this table, what was said to you folks when you expected municipal accommodation staff to be allocated specifically for community center renovation projects?
when we back in 2023, when we started the whole thing, we were talking, and we heard that, because we fought for the FTEs, we sent letters from District 1 to committees, and we were basically under the impression, and what we were, I mean, that one of them, at least one of them would come towards the community centers, to help out at community centers. That's what we were told, and was impressed to us.
Okay, so as it stands right now, the community center board picks a project, and I don't necessarily disagree with Councillor Lukes. However, it's the board of the day and their decision. There probably should be some more organization of what exactly is the needs of the health and safety of the building structure itself. We could look at that a different day, but a board picks a project of the day, and they put that in to the city for a grant. Walk us through, how long does that typically take now, on average, to go through? And what are some of the implications of that grant not going through quickly to the cost of the overall project?
Well, we just finished our project this past summer, and we got the grant in 2023. So it was 2023. So it was like about at least a year and a half. It took us, by the time we got legal and we got the project sign off and all that to go ahead, was probably about, I'm going to say, 8 months. And then after that 8 months, we lost our contractor because they were doing something at Winnipeg South and had trouble there. And then all of a sudden the contractor at Christmas said, "We're out of here. We're not doing any more projects for the city." So then we had to go out. We had to go get requotes.
Yeah. And of course, I'm assuming your costs went up with those quotes? Potentially.
Yeah, probably about 15% at least.
So now this report recommends that the 2026 Community Center Renovation Grant Program capital budget be increased, but that increase potentially go towards an additional salary to have an assets and project manager department, municipal accommodation to assist with this program. So are you guys fully understanding what is in this report and
Yep.
what we're being considered here today?
That's what we're looking for, that to get that extra person to help out with municipal accommodations.
But your understanding was, excuse me, your understanding was that in past budget, 2023, I believe it was, that this was already being asked of the department by council, that a municipal accommodation staff go towards community
Yes.
centers. Two.
Well, that one was, we never thought that two would come over and help out the community centers, but we thought at least half of it, one of them would come.
So did I.
So I mean, that's, and for whatever reason, I don't know, for whatever reason it was, but it didn't happen, and now we're asking again for it. But we don't want to take any money away from the grants, because $2 million, I mean, it's only $2 million. 63 community centers, 215 buildings. I mean, do the math. There's just not much money to go around.
Well, I apologize, Mr. Mayor, just one point to that.
We'll move on, yeah, thank you.
In consideration of that large number specific to community centers, municipal accommodations, I believe, had another like 800 to 900 buildings that they're managing throughout the city of Winnipeg. So all in all, it's a mess.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bill.
I feel like you really don't need to hear from me now, but I'll keep this really short because I'm here to back up Bill and the community center boards. Sorry, I didn't wait to be introduced, but I'm Laura Maisman. I'm the executive director of General Counsel. And thank you very much for hearing me out. I will be very brief, I promise, not 15 seconds, but less than 10. I want to just throw in some background because there is a team that is working behind the scenes with community services and municipal accommodations to help streamline and support this report. And I know that Cindy Fernandez and Kelly Lemoyne will be down here to share a little bit more about the report, so I won't go into details. But and also, there's a number of items that Bill's pointed out today that we absolutely think will help to remove barriers. But again, honestly, unless there is enough support through the Municipal Accommodations Division, it's very difficult. There's long wait times and costs increase. And really, at the end of the day, these are city buildings, and there's increased liability. We just heard that Bill had an incident at his community center. I want to just share one piece, though. I was recently at a Recreation Manitoba Connect 2025 conference, and they talked about the national framework for Canadian parks and recreation. And the original framework was introduced in 2015, and it was called the Pathways to Wellbeing. In 2024, they did an update to that, and I just want to share something that's in their executive summary in this 2024 report. It reads that the recreation and park sector plays an important role in fostering the health, well-being, and resilience of Canadians and the communities in which they live. Volunteers and practitioners within this sector make critical contributions by providing accessible recreation activities, conserving nature environments, and creating spaces that encourage physical activity, social interactions, and connectivity with nature. Increasingly, the sector is also being asked to play a critical role in crisis preparedness and response. These efforts significantly enhance the quality of life for Canadians, underscoring the value of recreation and parks in building stronger, healthier, and more resilient communities. First, the document discusses the importance of fostering health, well-being through accessible, inclusive recreation facilities and services, emphasizing the role that recreation and parks play in enhancing community strength and individual health. So my point is there's over 8,000 volunteers governing 63 community centers, yes. A lot of them are putting in the maintenance funding themselves because they get operating grants, so they are doing the work to maintain these buildings. But there's major projects that happen, and I heard the question about boards deciding on what to do. Yes, sometimes they decide to do pretty things that don't make any sense. And yes, if they have the inspection reports, which only recently have been slow to come, again, just workload. And I do think that there would be more renovations projects picked. The other thing is they can apply for up to $100,000. You don't have to apply for $100,000. If those windows or doors are falling off the hinges and we come around and we say, you should address that, you can apply for the renovation grant. Do that first. Some community centers choose to strategize around big projects because they want to offer recreation and leisure activities that make sense in their community. So they plan to get 100,000 here and maybe go to the province for this amount and another grant for this amount. And before you know it, it's years before they've had a chance to upgrade. So really this renovation grant is intended for those needed, these as opposed to the wants, but the needs. If your doors are falling off the hinges, get them fixed. And that's really what we're working towards. And I will be honest, we're all working together towards the same goal, and that is to make sure that they're safe and inclusive. And Councillor Lukes, I also heard your question about the number of buildings. 100%, I do think Plan 2045 is on its way up to EPC. And while we don't recommend closures because it's a grassroots project, no community center is going to want to say, hey, close us. But there are things that I think can happen over the next number of years. So that's it for me. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Maisman. Any questions at all? Councilor Lukes.
Thank you very much, Laura, for all the work you do. Incredible work. I don't think people really realize how much you do. So thank you. I remember that 2013 presentation or study. I was involved in recreation, as we all are. I would really be interested, if you wouldn't mind sending the link to that new report. That sounds very interesting. I think it's absolutely crazy to have 63 community centers that are built in the 60s that we're trying to maintain. It's impossible. I think what will happen is they'll just rot, and then we'll have to shut them down because people don't want to look at radiuses and distances. And I hear you, it's nice to walk to it, but if it's unsafe and it's rotting and falling apart, and there's no hope in really upgrading it, I don't know how good that is either. So I'm not crazy about the fact. I don't know what 2024 report's going to present. I went to the AGM. I'm not sure. It doesn't sound like it's going to recommend. I mean, we're recommending amalgamation, but it's impossible to fund and maintain these buildings. Like, I honestly think we should do some amalgamation, and the 100,000 that people get, if you amalgamate, you'll get the 100,000. Like, I don't know. It's not sustainable the way it is. It just isn't. And the whole process of volunteers going through this renovation process, it shreds them. I know of people that have quit because it just shreds them. And I was part of the shredding prior to being elected on processes, right? On many processes, Parks Department, another one, shreds volunteers, right? So we're going to try as best as we can to somehow fix this to make it better. I know through my experience in the last 4 or 5 years of being able to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for community centers, not knowing there's a hole in the roof because the MA didn't really accentuate, or whoever didn't accentuate, that's something you should be worked on, right? So there's some challenges, and know that you've got a committed team here that are going to try and somehow figure this all out.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Express my appreciation to you, Laura, and your entire board as well for the great work. It was good to be with you, along with Councillor Santos and Lukes at the AGM just recently. And so, again, my thanks to all of you.
Thank you very much, and happy birthday. Take good care.
Thank you.
Okay, our last delegation today is Joe Cornelson, Executive Director of the West End Biz, to be heard in support of report number 7.
Good morning, welcome.
Hey, good morning. Great to be here. I have some printouts to hand around. Do you want me to just come around that way?
Are they the same as what you submitted?
They're a little different.
Okay, can I just get a suspension of the rules?
Kill, the suspension, the Councillor Brawadi moves suspension of the rules to see this new information. All in favor?
Aye.
Colleagues? Colleagues, I called the question.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, all right, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. I
I'll
appreciate
count that as support. I think it's a tie vote, but I think that's-
Awesome.
Thank you, go ahead.
Yeah, so in the frantic rush this morning to get my kids to their grandparents' place and to school, I did not bring my updated PowerPoint, so I brought these printouts. Luckily, I believe in redundancy. So I'm just going to say the slide that I'm on as I'm talking. So we're on slide 1. So I'm here to speak about graffiti funding for the West End Biz and the need for an increase in funding from the City of Winnipeg to our biz to support the work we do. Since 2019, we have been receiving a grant of $38,000 through the City of Winnipeg's Community Partnership Funding allocation to do removals in the West End. And we are requesting an increase to $55,000, or a $17,000 increase. The reason we are asking for this increase is that rising costs and increasing graffiti have made the provision of service increasingly unsustainable. Slide 2. The West End Biz performs graffiti removal services in our neighborhood on residential and commercial buildings, as well as on various street infrastructure, including small hydro units and traffic signal boxes. We operate year-round, primarily on weekdays, and we will use chemical, paint overs, or pressure washing to remove, depending on the surface, and in winter we remove using soda blasting. Slide 3. Until the end of last year, we were providing our graffiti removal services to 10 other businesses in Winnipeg in addition to our neighborhood. These are the regions we were covering. You'll see on slide 3 the regions we were covering. For our services in our biz, we charged a fee that had been intended simply, or for other businesses, we charge a fee that simply covered costs. For years, in the spirit of partnership, we had tried to keep our fee as affordable to the other businesses as we could, but finally last year, costs had escalated too high, and we had to increase prices significantly for the businesses we perform removals for. As a result of this price increase, 3 businesses are no longer in the partnership and are now relying on the city removal services, meaning the city is now covering 100% of their graffiti removal costs. Slide 4. Here you can see the rise in graffiti we have seen between 2014 and 2023. In 2014, we removed 6,666 square meters, or 72,000 square feet. In 2023, we removed a record-breaking 12,056 square meters, or 130,000 square feet. This chart represents the removal needs in the West End plus demand from other businesses in Winnipeg that we do removal for. The West End biz makes up about half of our total removals, and the other businesses make up the other half. Slide 5. In 2024, we updated our cost analysis and found our entire graffiti program was costing about $130,000 to run. This accounted for cost of time spent performing removals, administration costs, vehicle and warehouse contribution, supplies, etc. And we found that it cost us $10.57 per square meter, $10.57, per square meter we were removing, based on the last 3 years' removal average. Average tag size is 2 square meters, meaning the removal of one tag costs just $21.14, plus driving time between removals. To give you a sense of how good a deal our service is, we checked what it would cost for removals from private services and found that the base rate tends to start at around $250. Slide 6. The objective of our pricing scheme is to share our services with our peer businesses at a cost, not at market. As you have seen, the quantity of graffiti has been rising and so has our costs, but unfortunately the grant we're receiving from the city has not risen in tandem. From 2014 to 2024, we've seen one permanent increase to the West End Business Graffiti program, which took place in 2019. Slide 7. Here you can see dollars per square meter we remove provided by the city in nominal terms. A drop from $5.25 per square meter in 2014 to $3.54 by 2024. That's a drop of 32.5% before accounting for inflation over that period. This works out to an average city cost of $7 toward removal of an average tag that costs us $21 to remove, in a city where private removal costs over $250. Slide 8. The West End Biz isn't against sharing in this affordability that we have achieved. But I am here to say that we need a contribution that better represents our shared responsibility. Today you can see that the West End Biz is carrying over half the burden of our graffiti removal program, a program designed to address vandalism and blight that affects us all. And you can see also in that chart what the other businesses have been providing. Slide 9. Our objective is to move to a more even split. Here you can see that the funding request I am putting in does a better job of sharing responsibility. Under this scenario, the biz community continues to cover between us over 50% of the burden, but there is a more even representation from the city on these costs. And as Councillor Eadie mentioned, we have already sent out some revised pricing to some of the businesses, which we did not enjoy doing. It was not fun. Slide 10. I think one question you might have is this increase in removals a result of more graffiti or the West End Biz just pursuing graffiti more effectively? The truth is, I don't know. I do know that we have gotten much better and more efficient. Adding drive-in warehouse space to our lease in 2022 has meant we don't have to load and unload paint each evening in the spring and fall. We can leave the pressure washing equipment on the vehicles later in the season. Our maintenance coordinator, who has been overseeing graffiti removal for 23 years, is also constantly innovating. He is always tinkering with our automated digital reporting procedure to save a minute or two here and there. 2 years ago, the graffiti team overhauled our biz visit schedule when we go out to other businesses from particular days of the month into a sequence model, and that led to more efficient service provision, less missed days for businesses that had to then be made up for on a different date. So slide 11, you can actually see the effect of our service efficiency in our improved reporting times. In 2015, we promised removal within 10 business days. By 2023, we had begun measuring more precisely, and our response time by then had fallen to 5.8 business days, and last year we got it down to 3.2 days. But I also know that we have additional costs like warehouse space, higher vehicle costs, higher labor costs, and of course inflation has meant higher supply costs as well. Slide 12. Regardless of whether our graffiti numbers are up because there simply is more graffiti, or we are just more effective at finding and removing it, if we didn't remove what's out there, it would stay longer or go unaddressed entirely. If the West End Biz and other bizes would freeze our own funding and removal rates to 2014 levels, we would be leaving over 4,200 square meters on our streets, the equivalent of 2,000 average-sized tags, and an average-sized tag is 18 square feet. Or perhaps more dramatically, we would be leaving 34 of these monster tags, the one on the last slide there, enough for each city ward to have 2. I think we all know that this scenario would be terrible for everyone. For this reason, I'm here to ask that the city consider this program as essential as it is and support the West End Biz in its provision of this extremely affordable graffiti removal service with a $55,000 contribution beginning this year. I didn't mention at the beginning, but I did want to thank Mayor Gillingham and all EPC for taking the time to listen to my presentation.
Great, thank you very much. Just a couple questions that I have.
Yeah.
Mr. Cornelison, in the pie charts here, so I think you might have said it, but just to clarify, 2024 graffiti funding breakdown, where the blue portion of the pie, it says other funding, so is that the funding you receive from other businesses who?
Primarily, that is almost entirely from what we get from other businesses, yes.
All right. And you might not have the answer to this, I don't expect you to have the answer to this, but in case you do you have a sense of the police service and how many individuals they are identifying and arresting? I know within the police service there is a graffiti unit as well. Do you have a sense of how many individuals who are perpetrating these crimes are identified, found, arrested?
I don't know the exact number. I do know that we have been contacted in the past by police, particularly looking for camera info, or camera, like if there's cameras in buildings, for graffiti cases that they are addressing. So we have seen it. I would say that that's happened twice in the last 5 years in my time as executive director.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any other questions at all? Councilor Lukes?
Okay, I was going to ask Councillor Gilroy this, but as the mayor brought it up, I'll ask you too. So I was wondering about this, the whole camera and the police, right? Like, I'm wondering, you said you've only heard twice that you've had interaction about them asking for information. So I know the province has a program, right, for cameras that are out there. It's for businesses. I'm assuming a lot of businesses are tagged. Are your businesses, or do you make them aware that this program is in existence, that the province has this program?
You're talking about the new safety rebate program?
Yes.
So I believe that program has not launched,
Okay.
but our whole team is watching for the moment it gets launched. The last time the one was one that was launched last, I think it was last year or the year before, we were on it immediately. We sent it to every single member on our mailing list. We sent it a couple of times.
Right.
I think it got oversubscribed really quickly. I don't know exactly how many members were able to take
It was
advantage.
extremely onerous to fill out.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So, good, okay,
Yeah.
you're on it, we're waiting for the announcement for it to be released. I don't know what the police can get from graffiti and camera use, but,
I'll add also that we have a grant program that will give any member 50% of a safety improvement project, up to $1,000. So, if they're installing something like rock glass or cameras, anything like that, we will provide
right.
dollars.
And I guess then my other question is, so these businesses that aren't using your services anymore, it is, in one way, one could look at it as a cost savings, but not really because costs have gone up.
Yeah, it's ultimately, like, I highlighted how inexpensive our program is.
Yeah.
If you had to switch to the private market, it would be very expensive, or you could switch to 100% removals from the city of Winnipeg. I think that we offer, like, what I think gives the city value is the fact that we are willing to share this cost, because, we respect that it affects us all. It's one of those things where if you left it totally unfunded and the citizens had to go to the private market to deal with, we'd be cutting off our nose to spite our face. Like, it's a little like sidewalk snow clearing. Every time I see a sidewalk snow clearer burn past, it takes about 2 seconds to cover 25 feet of my property. I'm just like, that is probably worth my tax dollars. You know, it would take me 10 minutes to go and do that myself. And I'd say that it's the same thing here with this. It's I think definitely worth it. I think we prove our value significantly.
And so I guess, you know, I know the police have many, many big issues to deal with, but this again is a criminal activity. What is your interaction with them on graffiti removal?
So we let police know, we remind our members to report graffiti when it happens. I would say that like the West End Biz is thinking a lot more about reporting. Certainly in the last 2 years, you know, ensuring our members are reporting crime is become a very high priority on our part. We have a particular position that we fund called our safety liaison, and his role is to go and meet with members if they were victims of any type of crime and give them guidance on how to report crime. So report the crime. So when it comes to graffiti, I think that we probably could do that more, but you know, I would say that's definitely on our radar.
Right. And I guess my last is a comment. I just want to thank you for all you do, Mr. Cornelison. I know you do an incredible, incredible job, and our city's better because of it, because of your work. Thank you.
I'd say the same to all of you.
Good. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Appreciate your time today.
Okay, take care. Have a great day.
Thank you. I think that's our last delegation.
Correct, yes.
Okay, moving into reports, and the first is the item of the City of Winnipeg proposed public art program, percentage for art program. Appreciate the delegations who came today. Also appreciate our staff, as I said a moment ago, who have been working with our delegation. So I believe we've got amending motion here. Councillor Bawadi is bringing forward. I wonder, Councillor Bawadi, do you want to just read the amendment here and maybe just explain the rationale behind it, please? Thank you.
Sure. Again, this is regarding the City of Winnipeg proposed public art program, and my proposal is to move the following: that the proposed public art program report be referred to the Strategic Priorities Action Planning process prior to the 2027-2030 multi-year budget process, and that the proper officers of the city be authorized to do all things necessary to implement the intent of the foregoing. Again, we've been very fortunate in Winnipeg to have some great public art included in a lot of our public projects. I heard people mention, you know, for example, the public art along the Blue Line going out to the University of Manitoba. So anyways, yeah, this proposes that, you know, again, council, the next council will have to, as we did this term, work on our priorities for this term of council. And I think this would be a good opportunity and the right opportunity to direct that into that process.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'll support that. I think, you know, one of the values in having a strategic priorities action plan of council is that really determined, it was a time of discussion to identify the policy priorities for council. And then the multi-year budget funds the plan. You know, for so many years it was backwards. We just go year to year and we would kind of make up policy kind of budget year by budget year, kind of on the fly, determining, you know, what ended up in the budget or not. The strategic plan is the plan, and then the budget funds that plan. And so I think moving it to the strategic plan instead of just to the budget actually would give this more weight. It will allow council in the, you know, in its update of the strategic plan to identify the degree to which the future council wants to continue to prioritize public art, and then to fund it through the budget process. So to me, this would in fact give it more strength. We do have all the work that is before us, the work of the report. The only difference that really we're making here is that what was being proposed was that it be approved for the next multi-year budget process beginning in 28. What this is saying is, first of all, one step before that, go to the strategic priorities budget, strategic priorities plan, and then it goes into the multi-year budget for the same year. So this is just, you know, having the discussion at council rather than through the budget, but as part of the strategic planning process. So, okay. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Duncan?
Yes. Just comments towards this. Obviously, you know, I support funding public art. I don't disagree with the delegates today to say we should be doing it sooner rather than later. This 27 timeline is definitely later. If I were to concur in this amendment, I would seriously want to look at the points that one of our delegates made about capping it, removing the cap to it. I don't know that 1% is necessarily appropriate, but we would need to address also, and Councillor Eady pointed this out, particular projects, especially when it comes to our water and waste, and the fact that we are going and asking residents today to pay more on all fronts for services, and then to say that any form of that pay more is going to go to public art. I don't have a sense at this point in time if that would be popular amongst the majority of Winnipeggers. For me, I look at this tying it to, and Mr. Pincott spoke today about poetry and water and waste. I've never looked at it that way, but I would look at this more so tying it through public works and road projects as a priority. I would like to see something done sooner rather than later, but I do agree with Councillor Browati's motion that we do need to have a strategy here, and that does come through our strategic priorities action plan, as it should.
I think too, I did hear, I wrote down, our delegates, notes from our delegates. I know Mr. McLaren requested 3 things. A third is that we consider implementing something in part in 2026 budget. So again, but this, I did hear that and make note of that. So, okay, with that, I'll call the question on the report as amended. All in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, carried. Thank you. Item number 2, Councillor Duncan, please. Appointment of city representatives to the Winnipeg Civic Employees Benefits Program, Pension and Disability Fund.
Yeah, not to be too picky and choosy about this, but just for wording, appointment of city representative. I believe it's Lisa Hoban on both fronts here. So moved.
Okay, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Item 3, City of Winnipeg nominee for Inland Port Special Planning Authority Board, Councillor Duncan.
Yep, move Mr. Platt here from P&D, as recommended by the Public Service.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Item 4, Councillor Eady, this is a contribution.
Yes, I'd like
Yep.
to,
Go ahead, no, go ahead, yeah. You go ahead.
yes, I'd like to move extension of up to 150 days for the comeback about what kind of exterior sidewalk area updates and other capital investments need to be done.
That is the motion. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Item number 5 is the process improvements for the community center renovation program, grant program, pardon me.
Is it possible?
Councillor Santos?
Yeah, is it possible, Mr. Bear? I think we have some people from the public administration to come down. I'd like to ask them some questions, please.
Sure. Okay, we'll have them come down, please. And then I'm going to turn the chair for a moment to Councillor Lukes. Okay, right back.
It's pretty simple, right? This is what we direct. Why didn't you do it? Yeah, got it. Well, better time for us to ask them, put them on the hot seat.
Yeah, members of EPC, we have Director Cindy Fernandez, Kelly Lemoyne, as well as Assets Project Manager Jeff Patton, Brad Erickson here from Municipal Accommodations.
Hello, hello. All right, so welcome. So who has a question? Was it you, Councillor Santos? Or?
Councillor Lukes, Councillor Santos, would it be amendable by the committee to just get a brief overview here so that we're all clear on exactly what it is?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, we can do that. I'll have Kelly Lemoyne provide a summary of the report.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. First of all, the report before you was requested by EPC, requesting that the public service provide ways to simplify and reduce red tape associated with CCRGP, clarification of the definition of joint procurement, as well as clarification of positions provided in the 2024 budget to the Asset and Project Management Department. So first of all, in first steps in determining what improvements could be made, there were meetings held between the staff from Community Services, Municipal Accommodations, and GCWCC. GCWCC also met with board members and all identified challenges and jointly considered areas of improvement. The report itself outlines the challenges identified through those discussions, which can be summarized as relating to human resource capacity at community centers, human resource capacity at municipal accommodations, the complexity of projects, and requirements of projects to meet standards applicable to all city buildings because community center buildings are owned by the City of Winnipeg. So included in the report before you are a number of process improvements that can be implemented within the authority of the CCRGP Evaluation Committee. For your information, the Evaluation Committee, as per the bylaw, is comprised of one employee of the Community Services Department, an employee of the Assets and Project Management Department, Municipal Accommodations Division, and an employee of GCWCC. The improvements that can be done within the authority of this committee include, but are not limited to, because they're still being explored, but the intent to increase the number of payments released throughout the process to provide better cash flow to community centers. Also, an annual application intake with an EOI intake period in advance of the annual submission. Development of educational materials as well as some training and seminars to provide community centers with a greater understanding of the roles and responsibilities of the community centers and why the processes are as they are. As well as we are also exploring an online application process, which will eliminate some inefficiencies in the acceptance and review of applications by the Evaluation Committee. However, as you heard today, both from Bill and Laura this morning, the most meaningful improvements to the CCRGP process will require additional resources in municipal accommodations. With the adoption of the 2024 budget, Council did approve 2 additional FTEs in assets and project management. These FTEs were funded from the Health, Life, Safety, Emergency Systems Refurbishment Capital to help deliver the planned works for that particular capital program for pools, arenas, libraries, and other assets. Community centers were not specifically singled out in that recommendation with the 2024 budget. Currently, MA has only 1 permanent FTE position responsible for operating the capital programs to provide maintenance, technical support, inspections, safety, and facility services for the 63 community center infrastructure, which consists of 215 individual buildings and 80 separate sites. That was and is in addition to responsibilities under the CCRGP program. This leads to the recommendations of the report, which is a referral to the 2020 budget to increase the CCRGP program by $120,000, increasing annually thereafter, increase the FTE complement of the Assets and Project Management Department, MA Division, by 1 FTE, including an increase to the operating budget of $120,000, increasing every year thereafter. And subject to both of these, that the cost of the new FTE be recovered from the CCRGP program. In addition, should those referrals move forward to the budget and should those be approved through the budget, the last recommendation is to address the challenges that have been heard from the community centers about the complexities of projects and the depth of volunteers that are able to run these projects. The intent is if an approved CCRGP applicant requests the city manage their project, the CFO be directed to bring back amendments to the CCRGP bylaw to enact or create a new annual community center renovation grant program within the division's capital to redirect the grant funding to, which will allow MA to manage the operations on behalf of the community center. So that's in general. That is sort of a summary of what you'll find in the report and our findings.
Any questions at all for our staff?
Sorry, can you,
Councilor Santos?
you spoke very quietly there. Can you repeat the last paragraph?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've heard from the community centers is that it is difficult. The projects can be very complex, and they don't have, the volunteers may not have the skill set to deliver the project. Should municipal accommodations receive the additional resources that are being requested through this report, at that time, we can open up CCRGP where a community center could request that the city manage the project on their behalf. So it becomes run by City of Winnipeg Municipal Accommodations Team. In order to do that, we would need the funds from the grant program returned into a City of Winnipeg capital program. So this report is then requesting that the CFO request through council an amendment to the bylaw to allow the funds that are approved for a community center to come back to the city and allow municipal accommodations to actually run the program, do the purchasing, et cetera. We can't do that type of purchasing on behalf of the community center unless we have the funds within the department.
Okay, so then on that point, okay, so then I guess I'm trying to clarify then this person, this FTE or whoever that are going to be hired through municipal accommodations, a bit of their job description, because as we heard from the delegates, that there's certain things of the community centers that they don't necessarily are capable, like the volunteers are not capable of understanding of what's missing, especially when it comes to holes in roofs or stuff like that. So could you help me better understand this program manager? So are they just strictly for managing the program? They're not there to assist with, you know, the, I guess, what the deficiencies are in the building? Could you help clarify that for me?
Brad, do you want to address that?
Sorry, I think there would be capacity for
I
that.
can't
person.
hear. There's something going on in the background here. So you're going to have to kind of speak up, please.
Councillor, I think there would be capacity for the person to assist with those, with that level of service, that being technical, respecting the building systems, that the community centers would otherwise be responsible for implementing the projects.
That didn't answer my question. I still got even more confused. Sorry, Brad.
So Councillor, right now,
Treat me like I'm in grade 6. I don't understand. I don't want to be very technical. Just plain language, if you could please.
at present, we have a single community center representative or liaison who works with all of the community centers in support of all of the asset-related projects that go on in community centers. When there's a highly specialized or technical project, that person does lean on our project services team to assist the community center when they need help. Not all of the community centers need help. Some of them are very, very well-resourced in terms of their building systems and their building asset management, their project management. But the ones that don't have those internal resources, we make every attempt with our team, not just the one staff we have dedicated to them, or with this incremental staff, to assist the community centers when they need that help.
Okay. So the ones that are, I guess, more challenging, this program manager, this one person that's assisting, are they creating reports? Are they creating building assessment reports for the community center volunteers to know what the deficiencies are?
So, Councillor, yes, like just, the current one staff member already does these annual inspections, provides reports to the community centers. So this additional incremental person will assist with that process to ensure those reports are getting out, making sure that they're understood by the community centers. So that's one element of their job. Just referring back to the report, we kind of describe a little bit more what they're doing, but also this incremental one person, if requested by the community centers, would actually run a project depending on their availability for that community center. So if they're doing, so we're looking at a project manager, a project officer too, which is one of our designations for a project manager. They'll run that project for the community centers instead of the volunteers doing that, where there's capacity. So they can't, this one person is not going to be doing 60 different projects, right? They're going to be doing a couple of projects that are significant or that have complexity to them, And that, because there are city procurement policies that all have to be followed, permits that need to be pulled, et cetera. So that's what that extra person is doing. So they're assisting with the annual inspection program, and they're actually assisting with project delivery for the community centers when requested and as they are available as well.
Okay, so assisting, what does that mean, assisting?
So we provide, it can run the gambit, Counselor. So in terms of what we do, as Brad indicates, technical assistance. So these are where we'll provide our expertise to advise the community centers on the processes they have to follow to complete their project, making sure they get, Brad will correct me at any time, they're making sure that permits are being pulled, that project documentation is being done. So that's a level of assistance we give the community center that kind of run that project. Then there is this incremental level of service, this where we take on the full, it's like the city's doing that work in that building. And as to what Cindy and Kelly indicated is that, you know, the city has enacted a grant program. You're giving the money to the community center. So now for us to run it, we'd have to get that, you'd have to transfer it back to the city. It's just a very, you know, we're adding red tape to a process that's supposed to reduce red tape. So we want to make sure there's a bylaw change that would allow us to redirect that, redirect the funding to MA to just run the project. So if there's an approved project at a community center, it's complex, they want the city to run it instead of their volunteers, that would come back to us, money would be redirected, and we would just dedicate the resources and get that work done. Tender it through the standard city processes.
Okay, so I understand that. Okay, so I get that. They are more of a, an assistant. So, which I totally understand, but I'm still not hearing we need somebody to actually assess the building of the deficiencies. Where is that person? Because what I'm hearing is we have one person that's doing the 66, and we have one person assisting with the program to do the permits and all that stuff and funneling the money. I totally get that aspect. I think that's fantastic. But I'm not hearing the portion where we have deficiencies in our community centers. Where are we going to have somebody that's actually going to review the building itself, the building envelope? Where's that FTE? I don't see that. Or, and this is my second question, is it within the two FTEs that are being hired that were done through the multi-year budget?
Okay.
Maybe that's a two-pronged question, but hopefully I'm understanding. You're understanding my question.
Well, maybe I'll just quickly answer the building condition assessments that are being done today will continue. The one person does those 60 buildings, does those building condition assessments, does a visual inspection of the building, provides an overview to what they've identified in their review.
So this one person does the 63, but do they also do all the 800 other buildings as well?
No. So, and also to differentiate, there's a much deeper dive into building condition assessments that are being done that are much more detailed and more comprehensive that we have not done to community centers. That's a whole separate program that we're doing. We're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on detailed building condition assessments related to arenas, related to the arena program right now. But the really deep dive where you have multiple disciplines, engineers from multiple disciplines coming in to review building condition assessments, those are not being done to that deep level. So right now they're condition assessments, they're visual, but that deeper level is not being done. So I just wanted to make sure there's a differentiation between these deep dive, a deep review of building systems versus the one person doing some inspections, which provides a great amount of information that can be actioned by the community centers and by the city as well.
Okay, so then the detailed one, we're stating have not been done. The detailed,
Yes.
the ones that we're doing for arenas, they have not been done for community centers. Can you tell me how many years we're at right now? The deep, like, we're lacking in how many years we have not done detailed condition assessments of our community centers? How many years are we saying?
It's hard to answer that. We have.
When was the last time we've done it?
Like a comprehensive building
Yes.
condition assessment. I don't believe we performed any in the last 10 years on community centers.
Okay.
Okay, other questions at all? Councillor Duncan, then Councillor Lukes.
Yeah, we've been around this card a few times. So walk us through exactly what it is that happened with the MA positions from the multi-year budget. The intention, by the sounds of it, over several discussions, were to go towards community centers, one or both. We'll debate that for another day. But regardless, from the department standpoint, what's the explanation?
So from those additional FTEs that were approved in the budget, right from the council-approved budget, they're dedicated toward arenas, pools, libraries, et cetera, not explicitly to community centers. So we've added those people to address backlog work in those other assets, but not specifically to community centers. So that's the direct language from the budget. So we can give you an update on recruitment as well, but that's what council approved.
And, yeah, thank you. And, okay, so not for specifically community centers. Were they funded with new dollars or existing dollars within MA?
They're funded within existing dollars within the capital program. There's a capital program recovery. There was no additional funds allocated.
Okay. So now we're suggesting that it be explored if the community center cannot deliver a program, that it be an option to give the city the authority to now go and deliver that through MA. Is this what I'm hearing?
Yes, that's what you're hearing, within the limit of that one person, right? So it'll be on availability, so we'll have to look at what projects come through the intake and what are the most complex and how we can assign this one they'll be dedicated to the community center program.
Okay. So my initial concern with that would be that this is identified by industry and all of a sudden the cost goes up and now we have even less money to distribute through all 63 community centers and 215 buildings. So should we look at the opposite as well to say, here you go, community center, you take the money and run with it because you know what you're doing, you have a board in place, and you may have connections to get it done without any involvement of the city whatsoever. Here's the check, get her done.
I'll speak to it a little bit through my discussions, and Brad can jump in at any time, that because these are city-owned assets, there are specific standards for, I can't think of a better word, that are required to be followed when renovating, improving, repairing city-owned assets. So that is why we have a project plan that is run through community, through municipal accommodations. There's also the requirements for, well, all buildings, permits, et cetera, but these all have to meet our city standards. If we were to do, say, for example, like the CIGP, where a community center grant program, we provide the applicant, the successful applicant, a check. They go forward and do the project, and then there's certain sign-offs at the end to get approval. They submit their project plan. They go ahead with the work. We don't own those assets, so that can be simplified in some ways. What we're looking at here, though, is that there still has to be a level of involvement and an approval by municipal accommodations. So just giving somebody the check and saying, go run with it with the community center when we own that asset is, what I understand is, we can't do that. We do have to have some level of involvement, and that's where I have to defer to the technical folks in municipal accommodations as to the why.
Okay, next question.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm interested in this then. So potentially to look at our continuing infrastructure that is in some cases falling apart, would we also then, would it be the recommendation, or would you folks on the public administration side say, maybe we should look at offering these community centers up to these boards to take off the books altogether for the city of Winnipeg? So it would appease that crowd out there that says, why are we continuing to fund buildings that are falling apart? Maybe some of those buildings that are falling apart are being run by more than capable boards that could go out and privately fundraise and still deliver great programming in the community and not have to decrease the number of services and locations that we heard are so important in those communities. I'm looking at different options here because what we're doing right now is clearly not working and is not a long-term fix.
So if I can.
Please.
So we've got 63 community centers, and they have various levels of skills, let's just say, right? Some of the volunteer boards are very, very savvy. They have a large range of skill sets available to them through their volunteer capacity on the boards. And then we have others that really are a bit struggling, right? So there's a range of capabilities for these community centers. What you mentioned, though, each of the community centers have the ability to raise money. They do that now. That's part of the model, is that the money that the City of Winnipeg provides the centers is for their universal funding formula based on their heated square footage, number of outdoor rigs. So that is not sufficient for them to completely run the community center. So each of the community centers then have to generate their own revenue, whether that be from programming, fundraising, advertising. That's what they currently do now. So I'm just thinking back to what your question was.
I'm looking at, and I'm trying to think through on the fly here, which probably isn't a good idea.
Right.
But how do we make this work? And now as you're speaking, I mean, we did a tour of a publicly run community center by the City of Winnipeg, very efficient in getting done what is the needs of that community. I mean, I don't think that there's a need to flip every community center over to the city. There might be some that would benefit from that because we've had ones that are run by GCWCC recently.
Yes.
So, I mean, I get it. We're going to have a report come forward to say, hey, this is how the public service would administer deliver these grants and the programs that are needed to upgrade these buildings. But like thinking outside the box here, maybe there are community centers that don't need to be under the thumb of the City of Winnipeg anymore.
Okay, so now I'm thinking
And there
back.
are that do need to be.
So your question,
Yeah.
like Kelly just reminded me,
Yeah.
was what would the City of Winnipeg be willing or wanting to provide and sell one of our community centers to the board? Because they are a legal entity, so a volunteer board. Is that what you're asking, is whether or not we could, maybe they want to buy it for $1 and then they take all responsibility of the lands, the programming, the buildings? Like, there might be a
Have we ever explored that option?
No, not as far as I know.
So the only time, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I'll cut it off at this. The only time that we step in and run the show is when essentially they're down on their hands and knees begging for help.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Well, they're like going to close the doors.
Well,
That's what I've heard.
there's a little bit of criteria required. I mean, if there is a community center that does not have a functioning board, okay, they haven't been able to be compliant with their submissions. They don't have enough members on their board, and they can't program.
Yep.
Then GCWCC can step in and take over. But that's supposed to be a short-term solution.
Yes.
That's not ever intended to be a long-term one, because ideally, we want the community to run their own community center, and they are the ones that are in a better place to know more specifically what the needs of their community is.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I had to step out a couple times there. Councilor Lukes, you,
So, yeah, my question here, a couple questions. So you're wanting a position to be referred to the 2026 budget process, but recently you posted a position. Is that a different position than this one here?
Absolutely.
That's a different position.
Yeah, the position that is currently posted is for a community center manager position in community services to lead the community center portfolio, which includes our community center liaisons, our community center renovation grant program, the CIGP program, all the compliance documentations, and essentially be that liaison between community services, GCWCC, and also working with MA.
Okay, and then I guess this is probably a question for MA. So we've got 215 buildings here that were built in the 60s and 70s, I guess. I guess it's really hard for me to understand why we're allowing community centers to make applications for the renovation grant when we don't really know the whole context of the building, right? It's sort of, we've not done the deep dive, as you're saying. I'm sure we've not done it, I'm sure we haven't done it for 20 or 30 years. Like 10 years, we'd still have some reports or something on what needs to be fixed, right? So, in your opinion, of these, well, I mean, I guess you don't know because you haven't done a deep dive on how many of these buildings have roofs that are rotting or sides that are full of mold, or we don't really know, right? Is that correct? Am I assuming that correctly?
We do the annual inspections.
That's just a visual, though. It's not,
Well, it's an inspection by someone who is sophisticated in community center assets. Not all buildings, as you know, not all buildings are created equal. A swimming pool is very much more complicated than a gymnasium attached to a community center. So the level of investigation that's warranted in different types of assets, either for regulatory purposes or just for prudent asset management, differs amongst the assets that are in question or that are under study.
right.
If I may, can I add to that? So like currently with the process is, we do have a staff person in municipal accommodations. She does the inspections. Are they as current and as quickly as they could be? Probably not. But when a community center applies for the community center grant program, the evaluation committee, which includes MA and community services and GCWCC, will look at that application and say, oh, okay, they're asking for a kitchen. And the evaluation committee will look and compare that to the inspection reports to say, well, yeah, that's great. They may want a kitchen upgrade, but the inspection report is revealing that they need to really spend money on X, Y, and Z. So that's then the feedback that will go back, whether it's going to be a denial or whether that will be a suggestion for them to consider a different project. And I think this is what Laura was saying, is sometimes the community centers would like to do the bright and shiny improvements to the facility, whereas we, as the building owners, would like them to focus more at the building envelope. So this is where it's a bit of a give and take. We certainly want the community centers to be involved and come forward with the ideas that they want, but it's truly up to the evaluation committee to make that final determination as to what is truly needed in the building. Does that help?
Yeah, it does, but I guess the visual inspection doesn't necessarily identify like holes in a roof. Like that's what happened in a community center that I'm familiar with, and they've raised hundreds of thousands, which is great, but yet there's a hole in the roof that appears. So And roofs, I believe, are a responsibility of the city of Winnipeg. So in the UFF responsibilities document, it clearly kind of outlines what's the role and responsibility of the city versus responsibility of the community center.
In
And
which
the roofs-
document?
In the universal funding formula document.
Could someone send that to me, please?
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for the discussion. Any other questions? All right, okay, we have the report before us. With the following, I won't read it all, refer to the 2026 budget process, so that's what we're voting on today. Okay, so thank you very much to our staff as well. Councilor Santos, you want to move this item then, please?
Yeah, sure. Lots of good debates, questions being asked. Definitely still some concerns I have. Councillor Lukes had brought up about, some of the conditions of our building. I just want to put some words on the record. Obviously, this conversation is not over. Very appreciate GCWCC and the previous delegate, sorry, the name escapes me, to kind of outline their support of streamlining the process. I think this is a good first step in doing that. However, I do have some concerns about the conditions of the building and the upkeeps, which I'm not really supportive of, selling off our assets at this point, but I think further dialogue and conversations of municipal combinations and program managers and building condition assessments, those conversations I like to continue having offline. But I will be supporting right now the public services recommendation.
Okay, that's a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Item 6, youth programming in high-needs neighborhoods. Request here for a 60-day extension. Councilor Santos?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'll move that extension of up to 60 days be granted to report back.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Item 7, increase in funds to the West End Biz for city graffiti removal. We have the presentations today. Councilor Brody?
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe very strongly that graffiti removal is very important. There seems to be quite the mixture of different people involved in graffiti removal right now that's publicly funded, whether it's city forces, biz groups, wipes available from the police, you name it.
Take Pride?
Take Pride is involved. Again, I know all of them do good work, but I mean, there's duplication in many cases too, so I find it confusing. But I would suggest that, again, it's, if Councillor Gilroy did want to do something in the interim, that she could use her communities fund potentially to fund graffiti removal through her ward office budget. I mean, we do get a pretty huge increase in the last couple of years. So I'm going to move to receive this as information.
All right. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, carried. Item 8, Land Dedication Reserve, Hedleth Park Foundation, Inc., HPF Food Forest 2024, Arboretum 2025. Councillor Eady.
Yes, I'd like to move the LDR grant indicated in this report.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item number 9, also a Land Dedication Reserve Fund. I think this came from, I believe, Councillor Chambers.
Yes, from
And so Councillor Eady, I'll turn it to you, yeah.
Yeah, it's my pleasure actually to move this LDR grant forward to council. It's an investment of local ward allowance money to assist the cause in the forest and cemetery. So I'll move the recommendation.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item 10, request to initiate local improvement for asphaltic concrete lane pavement. Councillor Lukes.
I'd like to move this recommendation. This is another couple back lanes that are being done, so that's good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Item 11, rezoning 237 Bertrand Street. Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, I'll move community committee recommendation on this one.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Let's do 12, 13, and 14 together, all related to Human Rights Committee of Council, budget review, annual budget, coordinator contract. Councillor Brody.
Thank you. I'll move the published recommendations.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item 15, citizen member appointments, committees, boards, and commissions. You do have a motion before you specifying the names of the individuals. And maybe I'll just read them out. I'll turn the chair to Councillor Lukes because I'll move this motion, if that's okay. For Centre Venture Development Corp., therefore be resolved, the following citizens be appointed to the Centre Venture Development Corp. Board of Directors for the balance of a 3-year term to expire December 31st, 2026. Ben Lee and Rafe Richardson. And then to the General Council of Winnipeg Community Centres, the following citizens be appointed to GCWCC for a 2-year term to expire April 30th, 2027. Janice Edwards, Tom Ethans, and Madhur Sharma. Ms. Edwards and Mr. Ethans are renewals. Mr. Sharma is new. So that is the motion I'm putting before everybody. Councillor Lukes.
Okay, all right. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, carried.
Thank you very much. Addenda reports, there's 2 here. Monthly update on supportive housing, addiction, and social action indicators. Don't know if we have anyone at this point. Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, I think this is great news, and I would like to hear from the public service briefly on this, if at all possible, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Do anyone here?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have Lucy Rappaport from the Housing Accelerator Fund.
Thank you, Mr. Armbruster.
On the screen.
Good morning, welcome, thanks for being here.
So this is our monthly report as we come every month to EPC. It's number 16. Apologies for getting in a day late, usually number 1. Just doing reports on housing applications approved per the mayor's motion from last year towards the 8,000 units, and then the building permits as under a Housing Accelerator Fund agreement. So we've seen a small increase over the last month, about sort of 500 in each category, which is great. And last month we added the map at the end, so that's a new addition that we'll keep including in each month. But yeah, I'm open to any questions. The report, as usual, is pretty simple now. We've sort of secured the way we're gathering the information. It takes quicker to compile. We've simplified the report to be clear and hopefully answers what EPC is interested to know.
Okay, all right. Any questions at all on this item? Councillor Lukes.
I do, just one. So this map's great. So what do you mean by the transit 1,500-meter walk shed?
So this is the same routes that are used in the other Housing Accelerator Fund initiatives. So it's the top 3 of the 4 routes in the primary transit network. So it's Rapid, Frequent Express, and Frequent. So we map those routes out on the map, and then we measure 1,500 meters to the stop, or to the intersection where the stop is planned or does exist. So a walk shed is looking at not an as the crow flies dimension, but actually looking at the distance to walk to the bus stop. Just for knowledge, for other initiatives like the zoning changes that are coming forward on June 2nd, it's the same routes, but that measurement is 800 meters, which is about a sort of 10-minute walk. Per the CMHC guidelines, 1,500 meters is what we need to report on. So it is a wider map area than you'll see the zoning changes, which supports us because it helps us get more units in that target area.
So it's the top 3 routes?
Yeah.
Okay, wasn't clear on that, so, okay. Yeah, great, great.
Just to clarify again, in the reporting, on the first page where you've got the table A, housing units approved since December 5th, so it's 16 months or so. Development applications, development permits, building permits, none of those are double counted, right? Those are all.
They are.
They
Could be. So
okay.
development applications is a direct addition of all the units in development applications. Now that we have been reporting for about 16 months, some of those will likely start showing up in development permits and building permits.
Okay.
So we aren't removing double counting because we're not actually summing these three categories together. The building permits, table 2 does address double counting because we do sum them.
Right, okay.
And I have one more.
Councilor Lukes?
One more question. So yeah, I found it very handy to have the affordable housing definitions chart. I've been using it. It's been great. Now, just to clarify, whose definition is this? Is this related, it's related to CMHC or?
It's not really. It's really just the City of Winnipeg's definition. We've been working on these as a city from back to our housing policy from 2018, further work through the poverty reduction strategy over the last couple years. And they've been just really working documents. They are tied to CMHC and the province in that our affordable definition, affordable housing essentially just defers to those definitions, but otherwise they're inspired by other levels of government, but not explicitly tied to.
Okay, so it's really then, because someone had asked me and I thought it was quite tied to CMHC, but it's got links to the province and CMHC, but this is the city's definition.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
On the second, in the second table, there's DU lost, so development units lost, right? So just explain what that is again, please.
It's primarily demolitions.
Yeah.
So we are counting if a house or an apartment building is being demolished, even if it is not being replaced by anything, so that counts. Or if it's being demolished and replaced, then we would calculate the net change. So, for example, someone might be tearing down a single detached home and building a duplex, so that would be a net new one.
So that
unit.
you don't count that the demolition as a loss, and then the single, you don't count it twice, basically, you just count the net.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So it could be demolitions, and then there are some scenarios where it might be an interior alteration to an apartment building where they're creating a larger unit by combining two. That's rare, but it does happen.
Right, okay.
Sorry, one more question.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Councilor Lukes?
Okay, so in a situation where we've got, let's say it's a hotel that houses people that are, I think there's a definition of hard to house. Is there a definition hard to house or?
Not in our written definitions. There's maybe some colloquial definitions of that, but yeah.
So when a hotel wants to do some upgrades or maybe make rooms larger or improve the shared washroom facilities, are any of those costs eligible for any of the funding grants that we've got or that the province has?
The hotel one is a hard question to answer because technically a hotel is in our books as a commercial use. So it's not as residential, and it's governed by the Hotel Act, which is actually provincial legislation. So it falls between a bit of a gray area in our housing policy. That said, renovation works are not eligible under the Housing Accelerator Fund grants or any of the funding there. We do, as a city, support renovation funding through the Housing Rehabilitation Investment Reserve, which is a small pot that the city contributes $1 million annually, primarily focused on the 5 housing improvement zones. There's renovation funds available in that fund. And the province has renovation funding for provincially owned social housing, but nothing for single-room occupancy hotels, to my knowledge.
Like, I just think, when someone's operating one of these hotels, if it's to close, if they don't have any support, that's a real challenge for the community, because many of these, not many, there's not many left, right? I used to live across from one on Adelaide, and it was more like an apartment, even though it was a hotel. It was more like an apartment. People have lived in there for 15, 20 years. So there's not really, what I'm hearing is there's not really any funding available for those. And it is a gray area, but if they close, then then we're in a situation of how to house all these people, right?
Yeah, it's certainly an issue that's present in our city. We've seen the closure of a number of them over the last couple of years, and often those individuals are moving into shelter or encampments.
Right.
So it's certainly an issue.
Right.
Thank you very much for this report. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Motion then, Councillor Duncan, to receive this report as presented. So moved. All in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Item 17 is related to, excuse me, the G7 and contract for police assistance for the 2025 G7 summit between City of Winnipeg and Calgary Police Service. Councillor Bawadi?
Thank you. I'll move it.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. We have the audit report now. So, Councillor Bawadi, anything on this matter?
No, I'm just thank the auditor and his department for their due diligence and their work year in and year out. I was asked by the media a little bit about the fraud and waste hotline and made some comments there. And at this point, I'm just ready to receive this report.
Yeah, I want to echo appreciation for our auditor and the team as well, and thank them for this report. Councillor Lukes.
Sorry. Can I ask a question of
Yes,
I
you
think
can,
the
of course.
auditor's here? Sorry.
Mr. Hager, sir.
No problem.
Three.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here. Councillor Lukes, go
Okay.
ahead.
All right. So in reviewing the report, and I know we have a meeting coming up, and I apologize, I didn't compare one report to the other. Have we made adjustments in our report here? Is this the report we've made adjustments in on how we're reporting?
No, this is the annual
Okay.
report. This is the activity for the year. And this
Okay.
is sort of us holding ourselves accountable to you guys on what we do in the year on that. So.
Okay, all right. Okay, well then we'll have our meeting and I have no more questions.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. All right.
Sorry.
Thanks so much.
Easiest question you'll ever
Easiest
get.
that was
question.
easy, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Councillor Bawadi, will you move this matter, please?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Moving on now to the report of the Standing Policy Committee on Water, Waste, and Environment dated late April 11th, 2025. We have 5 items on the agenda. Councillor Eady.
Yes, so item 1 is on the building emissions strategy.
Yes.
I have an amending motion at committee. We did discuss that we have a climate committee that's chaired, I believe, by Councillor Mays, and that it would be proper for them to have a look over at the strategy that we have laid out here over the years. Of course, there is a referral for projects to the 2026 budget process. But maybe, could I have Ms. McMillan read the motion out?
Of course. So be it resolved that the following be recommended to council, that the recommendation of the Standing Policy Committee on Water, Waste and Environment be referred to the Climate Action and Resilience Committee for review and report back to council at its June 26, 2025 meeting. Namely, A, that the building emissions reduction strategy attached as Appendix A be adopted as a long-term strategic plan to help guide energy efficiency retrofits, electrification and renewable energy integration in order to achieve significant greenhouse gas reductions while enhancing building performance and operational savings. That funding for the building emissions reduction strategy initiatives inclusive of capital be referred to the 2026 budget review process.
Okay, that's a motion. Thank you. So that is the amendment. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed. Okay, Councillor Duncan reported in opposition. Thank you. Item 2 is request for budget revision, South End Sewage Treatment Plant Nutrient Removal Expansion Capital Project.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Wasn't able to get a recommendation from Water, Waste, and Environment Committee. Mr. Mayor, this is an essential recommendation report where they're using some, we got a great bid on doing a major CSO trunk sewer in St. James. And we have a problem where there may not be complete in full the project at the south end, Water Pollution Control Center. So in order to be assured that if it doesn't work out, they'll have $10 million to cover hiring any contractors that are needed to be hired to complete the work so that this plant can operate way into the future. It is operating now, but there's a number of elements that need to be taken care of. And so the savings in the CSO are being, essentially, Mayor, it's being borrowed because there are surety bonds associated with this project, and there's more than ample room to recover that money for that plant and put it back into the CSO funding. And just so everybody also understands, I couldn't convince a couple of colleagues, but CSO work in this city, the contractors who undertake this work, they're fully employed in doing CSO control work, and so therefore there is no ability to utilize that money at this point over the next immediate future for CSO work, but it will come back. So I'm moving this recommendation from Water and Waste.
Thank you. I have reviewed the report and certainly am supportive of the administration's request here. And this is ultimately, just in case, I know that our staff is still working with the contractor to try to resolve the matters and get as much of the work completed as possible. And so we'll get updates, obviously, from our staff as this proceeds. Any other questions? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Item 3, this is the proposed agreement for services wastewater sewer works on 868 Regent Avenue.
We're not paying for that. I'll move this report.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Item 4, rapid response process for water and wastewater servicing capacity inquiries.
Well, as we heard from the delegations, finally, we'll move this along. It does need to be more rapid, and in the future, there might be a request for a larger fee for more complex developments that are happening. But essentially, at $220 for a fee, Water and Waste is setting up to be able to deal with inquiries by developers about the capacities of the sewers in these areas, wherever there is development. And we know that some areas, it's difficult to build larger multifamily units. Anyway, this is a much faster response. They're looking at some point a 2-week turnaround for inquiries. So I think that's real customer service that will help facilitate, Mayor, and our plans to have a lot more housing built in this city.
Thank you very much. Councilor Lukes.
Yeah, I'm really supportive of this. I've worked on a lot of development projects over the time frame I've been here, in both St. Norbert, River Park South, down St. Mary's Way, and in Waverly West, and Pembina Highway. One of the biggest concerns I hear is the delays and challenges in the Water and Waste Department with understanding capacity. So, yes, long time coming. This is good. Let's hope it delivers. I'm very supportive of this. Very supportive.
Yeah, I want to thank our staff. We need to get more housing built faster. Sometimes the delays in getting housing built is we just don't know. The developer doesn't know whether or not there is capacity. in the wastewater or water system. This will help our staff deliver that answer to developers faster. So this is good news. This rapid response process for applicants inquiries is about enhanced customer service. It's about a yes-first culture, and I'm really pleased to support this. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Item 5, in-house leaf and yard waste collection services. I believe there's a bit of an small amending motion to this item. Councillor Eadie.
I do have adding clause D. We'll get into that in a moment. I just wanted to talk about this report. If there's any way, Mr. Mayor, for us to try to save money on the waste management fee, we know that, I know for sure that Winnipeggers would be very happy we're paying the waste management fee. And if it can be done, the former report did have a comparison. It looked like there could be savings if the city delivered on the yard waste collection service. And so what's missing here, though, although I believe in the original report, when it looked at dollar values, it may have had it buried in there for the cost of equipment, but really the capital equipment is probably the biggest concern. And so just to ensure that our water waste, solid waste division utility considers the cost of equipment, we have the amending motion that I'll ask Ms. McMillan to read aloud, if you could, please.
Sure. We'd be concurring in the recommendation of the Standing Policy Committee, but adding the following new recommendation 1D, namely estimates of the capital costs for equipment required to undertake leaf and yard waste collection services considered in above recommendations 1B and C.
Thank you very much. Okay, all in favor? Sorry, Councillor Lukes.
Sure. I guess it's not really a question. Well, I mean, it sort of is a question. The department believes they can do this in 60 days. Is that what I'm understanding? Or that's the request of the motion, right? To come back with all this information in 60 days? Okay, that's good to know. I want that noted. And yeah, I mean, in our budget, in our continuous improvement activities, the public service is directed to continue and renew continuous improvement activities to identify efficiencies, control expenses, augment existing processes, improve customer service, and or generate additional revenue. So that's good. This is something I'm very interested in. If you know, we think we can do this at a more reduced cost and yet provide improved customer service, I'm open to this. I think there'll be some other motions coming forward along this to look at efficiencies and maybe generate additional revenue. So I'm supportive of this. I'm amazed if it'll come back in 60 days. I'm also amazed that the department isn't requiring any funding to do this research, but that's good news too. So I want that noted, maybe for future projects. Anyways, I am supportive of this. Thank you.
I note that you're noting those because I think you probably have other things in mind.
Other things in mind. Well, listen, we're looking for revenue and we're looking to save money. So I hope we're all open to this and other ones that come down the tube.
I should note, Mr. Mayor, there was a report not all that long ago, so the department is quite aware of what kind of pricing's out there and those kind of things. So, and what the demand would be for wages and so on.
Okay, we'll call the question on the item as amended. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. All right, we have addendum report, Standing Policy Committee on Public Works, dated April 14th, 2 items.
Yes, 2 items in Public Works. All right, so I'd like to move consent agenda of items 1 and 2.
Okay, item 2 is received as info, right?
Exactly.
All in
Yes.
favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. No meeting for community services. We do have 1 item on the first, March 6th, Property and Development Standing Committee, LeMay Forest. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be moving this to receive as information. However, just before doing that, I'd like to thank the department, in particular Jess and Gord over at Real Estate there for working with us. I'd also like to thank the mayor for working with the province of Manitoba to find a very amicable resolution to this. Obviously, the continued working relationship between the premier and the mayor has been very beneficial in this case. We are seeing a very happy neighborhood and a very happy community to be able to resolve some of the issues that came up during this debate. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Councillor Lukes.
Yeah, and I just want to put on the record, I'm very familiar with this project. In 2016, I brought forward a motion to have an assessment done of the land value. And I want to also thank the mayor, and I want to thank many councillors who also work behind the scenes. Everyone has a different way of advocating for something. Some people like to be out front and center. Some people like to advocate behind the scenes. And I want the public to know that a lot of advocacy work from many different angles occurred, not always front and center, but also behind the scenes. And as a person who 10 years prior to being elected did a lot of advocating front and center, and now understand that, and knew before too, but also really recognize that just because it's not in the newspapers or the media or the front page doesn't mean a lot of heavy lifting isn't going on behind the scenes for many people. And I know, Mr. Mayor, you did a lot of heavy lifting on this one, and it may not have been front and center out there waving flags or whatever. And I know a lot of councillors did too. So I'm wanting to put that on the record.
Really well said, Councillor Lukes, and I too want to acknowledge all the work of many, many councillors.
Yeah.
Some whose wards were a long way away from, geographically from
Yeah.
the May Forest. So that's well said. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carried. Thank you. Moving on to the next report, and that is the Standing Policy Committee Property Development, dated April 16th, 2025. There are 10 items. Councillor Duncan.
I'd like to go through each and every one of them individually. No, I'd like to move consent agenda.
We'll see you later.
Please and thank you.
Okay, I think Councillor Edie, you want to be recording opposition of 2.
Yeah, I'll call it after you call the question.
Okay, I'll call the question on items 1 to 10. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Councillor Edie, opposition of item 2.
Yeah, report item 2. Please,
Okay.
Ms. McMillan, yeah.
Finance and Economic Development also has no report this meeting, so we have consent agenda and adjournment. Councillor Duncan, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you all.